What's going on, YouTube? It's the Bushy Beard, and I'm back, and I'm bushier than ever. Right now, we're back with MrBallen, one of my favorite YouTubers.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, he's really good. I like it. And my dad was looking at the top 3 stories that sound fake but are 100% real videos that he does, and he likes them. So we're going to check them out.
Yep.
All right, ready?
Yep.
Without further ado.
Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and today we're going to look at 3 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, if it's of interest to you, please offer to take the like button out on your boat for a scuba diving trip, and once they get off the boat and they go underwater, just turn your boat around and head back to shore. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on
It just comes up with weird ways to say hit the like button.
all notifications so you don't
Which is good, you know?
Yeah.
It's not just the same old hit the like button.
miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories.
All right, what do you think it's about?
Pine tree needles?
That's what I was thinking.
Really?
Yeah. I have no other earthly idea what it could be about.
A 28-year-old Russian man named Artyom Sidorkin started having severe chest pains, and at first he tried to ignore it, but it got so bad he could barely stand up, and then he began coughing up blood, and so finally he went to the emergency room. When he got there, even before the doctors examined him or gave him an x-ray, just based on the way he presented to them, being pale in the face and hunched over and very sick looking, they assumed this must be something very serious. So that day, they brought Mr. Sidorkin in for an examination, and after talking to him and hearing about all of his symptoms and just looking at him, the assumption was he probably has a tumor in his lungs. And so they sent him in for an x-ray, and afterwards the radiologist looked at the x-ray and confirmed that, yep, there is a mass growing inside of your lungs. And so before they went to just start removing huge pieces of his lung, they told him that they would like to do a biopsy where they remove a small piece of the tissue and test it to see if it's cancerous or not. And so Mr. Sidorkin is terrified, but he says okay. He schedules his surgery. He goes in a couple days later, and the surgeon pulls out a piece of his lung tissue, and as it's sitting on the tray, he looks down at the tissue, the surgeon does, and he realizes there is something hidden inside of the tissue, as if the tissue was like an envelope holding something inside of it. And so he opened it up, and there, growing on the side of his lung, was a small fir tree. It was 5 centimeters long.
Whoa! No way!
That's crazy.
What?
Well, we're kind of right.
Oh, God.
We just didn't think it was going to be a whole tree.
Not vast enough of a...
That's crazy.
It was green, it looked very lively, it was just a thriving little tree. The doctors believed Mr. Sidorkin, who was a botanist, had inhaled a seed of a fir tree, and it got lodged inside of his lung tissue. And then as it grew, its pine needles began piercing his blood capillaries, causing him to cough up blood. After the discovery of what was inside of his lung, a spokeswoman for the...
That's crazy.
Holy free holy.
Jeez.
Don't you think they would have seen that on the x-ray instead of waiting till he goes in to get the biopsy, though?
Well, they said it was covered in tissue.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Royal Botanic Gardens in London said that it is possible for a seed to germinate inside of the dark, damp conditions inside of a lung, but it is unbelievably bizarre. When doctors informed Mr. Sidorkin that he did not have cancer, he had a tree, Mr. Sidorkin was shocked, and he said, I never got the sense that there was a tree growing inside of me. But more than shocked, he was just relieved that he was cancer-free.
Yes.
There is a picture of this tree inside of his lung tissue, but it's a bit graphic, so if you want to see it, go ahead and Google tree and lung, and I'm sure you'll find it.
Wow. Let's do it. While you're looking for that, let me just tell you, I did hear a story of somebody who was about to die from like this mysterious, I read this in Reader's Digest or something. Oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
I am speechless.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Holy cow. Anyway, he was about to die, and, you know, the mother was like, was sure that it was biting the fingernails or something, that the child had a coughing spree of some kind. Well, come to find out at the very end, they did find some fingernails that the kid, it was a kid, had been chewing and had gone down and gotten into the lungs, which was causing all the problems.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, the weird world.
As if that wasn't weird enough.
Yeah.
Growing up, Pauline Dakin always suspected that there was just something off about her family. And years later, she would find out she was right. In 1970, when she was 5 years old, her parents, Ruth and Warren, separated. And to Pauline, it wasn't that much of a shock because her father, Warren, was a heavy drinker and he was extremely violent. But after they separated and Pauline, her mother, and brother had moved into another house on the other side of Vancouver, Canada, Pauline noticed her mom started to act really anxious all the time, but she never knew why. When Pauline was 9, her mother told her and her brother that they were going to go on a vacation to Winnipeg, which is 1,000 miles away from Vancouver. And so they loaded up the van, they hopped in, and they drove all the way to Winnipeg. And when they got out, they went inside their new vacation home, and Ruth informed her children that they were actually never going back to Vancouver. And when Pauline and her brother said, "Why? Dad's still back in Vancouver. I want to see Dad." But Pauline said, "Sorry kids, this is the way it has to be, and when you're old enough, I'll explain everything." Confused and sad, Pauline and her brother...
That's weird.
Well, she may have been afraid that they would have revealed something and he might have been abusive.
Yeah, maybe.
began starting a new life in Winnipeg. Over the next 4 years, Pauline never saw her father, and so she lost touch with him. But she started making a couple close friends in Winnipeg, and she was starting to feel like this was home. But right as she was starting to feel normal, her mother told her and her brother that they needed to move right now all over again. This time they were going to go all the way to New Brunswick, the far east side of Canada.
Witness protection? No, because they kept the same names.
Yeah.
Their mother made them swear they would tell no one about this move. But later that day, when Pauline was with her best friend Wendy, she let it slip that she was moving, and so when Ruth came to pick Pauline up from Wendy's house, the two girls had to affect these sort of breezy goodbyes to each other so that Pauline's mother wouldn't suspect anything. Once in New Brunswick, the family did put down roots, and they stayed there for many years, but Pauline's mother still was just incredibly anxious and paranoid about something. The kids just had no idea what it was. Fast forward to 1988, when Pauline was 23 years old. She had moved 2 hours away from the family home in New Brunswick and was living with...
Kind of looks like Taylor Swift a little bit.
A little tiny bit. The hairstyle a little bit.
her boyfriend.
Maybe the eyes.
Yeah.
Not everything.
Much else.
And was working as a reporter at a local newspaper. And during that time, her mother called her and said, "Hey, I'd like to meet you at a motel. I'm finally ready to tell you everything about your childhood." Pauline...
At that point, I'd be like, "Yeah."
Are you kidding me?
I'd rather not know.
Probably rather not know, but she's a reporter.
Yeah.
She wants to know things that most of us don't want to know.
I guess. At that point, I'd just be like, "That's the past."
I don't know.
I'll
I don't
get
think
bogged
most
down in
people
the
would be
past.
like that. Would
Let
y'all
us
be
know.
like that?
Yeah.
No. I think what most people would want to know.
We'll find out.
Pauline was really intrigued and excited. This was a conversation that was literally decades in the making. And so Pauline eagerly went to the motel. She saw her mother waiting outside, kind of pacing around, looking very anxious. And so she walks up to her mom and she waves and she's about to speak when her mother just looks up at her and puts her finger over her lips, telling her to be quiet. And then she jams an envelope into Pauline's hands. And on the envelope, it just says, "Don't say anything. Put your jewelry inside of this envelope. It's probably bugged. I will explain everything inside. Just please don't speak." And so now Pauline's really confused, but she did as she was told. She took her jewelry off, put it in the envelope, and gave it back to her mother.
That's so weird.
Sounds like witness protection of a sort.
Yeah, no.
Or
It
she
has something to do probably with the mafia or something.
something like that.
I don't know. Again, at this point, when she says probably bugged, I'd be like, "All right, I'm out."
Really?
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe her?
No, I'd just be like, I don't need to know now. If it's that big of a deal.
But that you're being bugged. You'd
Right. But if other people want this information that bad, why would I want to know the information?
Yeah, well, I see your point.
And then the two of them silently walked into the motel, into the room where Pauline's mother was staying. When they went inside, there was a man sitting in the middle of the room that Pauline immediately recognized. It was the reverend of their church when they used to live in Vancouver. His name was Stan Sears, and Pauline's mother had been his secretary the whole time they'd gone to that church. Pauline always knew her mother and
Affair?
Yeah, sure.
Stan were close
That's what I'm thinking, at least.
friends, and in fact had kept in touch after they left Vancouver and were in Winnipeg and then New Brunswick. In fact, Pauline remembers periodically seeing Stan show up in Winnipeg and New Brunswick to visit with Pauline's mother. So it was a surprise, but not a total shock, when Pauline's mother confessed to her that in fact she and Stan had fallen in love, and in fact they had had a secret relationship from the time they lived in Vancouver. But this revelation was nothing compared to what Pauline heard next. Her mother explained that the reason they had had to move so many times during her childhood was because Pauline's father, Warren, was actually a mobster and was a key member of an organized crime syndicate in Vancouver. Right after they separated, Pauline's mother found out she had a hit put on her head because the mob now believed that the husband could not control her anymore, and she knew too much.
See, I figured it was something along that lines. Again, why would you want to know this information now?
Maybe he's
Now,
dead now.
your curiosity has peaked, and now you're in danger because of it. You
Well-
know, they say curiosity kills the cat. I'm not a cat. I'm not dead.
Gotcha. Gotcha. But maybe he's dead now.
Maybe.
Or in prison.
Much. Stan also found out that he had a hit on his head because Ruth discovered that the mob wanted to kill him too because they knew about their relationship. And then also, apparently Stan was counseling a man that was in his congregation that wound up being a mobster, and so the mob believed this man had given up critical information to Stan, making him even more of a liability. At first, Stan said he didn't believe any of this, but when he found out the man he had been counseling had been assassinated, he knew it was true. They decided not to tell the police and instead go into hiding together because Pauline's mother knew what happened to families that snitched on the mob. They were made examples of.
Snitchers and talkers get stitches and walkers.
And so when Pauline and her family moved to Winnipeg and then to New Brunswick, Stan actually moved there as well in tandem, which is why Pauline had seen him periodically showing up at their house to visit with Pauline's mother. Pauline was understandably completely shocked, but at the same time, she was kind of happy to have some sort of explanation for all the strange things that had happened in her childhood. And so over the course of the next several hours, Pauline sat in this motel room with her mother and Stan and asked them every question she could think of. And she discovered that whenever she came home from school and she found her mother furiously pulling all the food out of the fridge and the pantry, throwing it all away with no explanation, that was actually because they found out the mob had tried to poison them. Or these 6 different times
How would they
Pauline
find
was
out?
unenrolled from the school she was at and then moved to a different school across town, that was because there was a credible threat the mob had discovered where Pauline was going to school. And so by the end of the weekend, Pauline not only learned about this totally crazy past she had, but she also learned that she was still in danger. And so before Pauline headed back home, she asked her mother and
So she was already in danger anyway, because there were credible threats at her schools.
When
So-
she was younger.
Yes, but now she at least needs to know that there's a threat out there. Let's just see.
Stan what she should do to stay safe. And Pauline's mother said, well, that's actually the reason we called you here now, because after all these years, we were just tired of being in hiding, and so we've already spoken to the authorities, and they've moved us into a special witness protection program for families connected to the mob. When you enter this program, it's referred to as entering the weird world, where basically you're not really safe, but you have agents that follow you around that are undercover, that track what you're doing and make sure there's no assassination attempt.
Would you like that? For me, I would rather live my life the way it is, and if I get assassinated, I get assassinated.
Well, assassinated is one thing, but tortured or,
Yeah.
halfway killed and you're paralyzed and,
I guess.
or, tortured is
I
another.
guess that's different than, the American witness protection program, because you're not really followed around in the American witness protection.
You're just,
You're
everything's
given-
changed,
Yeah, you're given
so
a
it'd
whole
be
new
harder.
identities.
Yeah.
On you. And before Pauline could even ask, her mother told her that as a measure of her and Stan entering the weird world, they asked that a couple of agents monitor Pauline and her brother, even though they didn't know they were being monitored. At this point, Stan reached forward with a radio and he said, here's a radio that actually broadcasts to the agents that are following you pretty much all the time. But you should only use it if you're truly in a desperate situation, because as soon as you call out for help, there are going to be people that are risking their lives to come save you. As Pauline is holding this radio, she looks at her mom and Stan and she says, well, what happened to Dad? Is he in jail? And at this point, Pauline's mother says, no, he's not. He's in the weird world too. And she handed Pauline a letter that was from her father addressed to Pauline, and it basically spelled out that he had been moved into the weird world and he was looking forward to Pauline joining them at some point when she was ready. So now Pauline has this radio and this letter, and she's looking at her mother and Stan, and she's just totally overwhelmed, and her mother just tells her, go home, think about what you want to do next, and if you want to join the witness protection program and join the weird world with us, just let me know and we'll make it happen. And so Pauline, who...
That's so weird.
It's a weird world. Holy cow.
Yeah, because here it's you're either all in it or none of you are in it.
No, that's not true, but you have to sever ties.
That's true, yeah.
You can't know where the other people are.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not...
Right, so this conversation that they're having would not have happened in the American world.
Correct.
Yeah.
In my limited knowledge of the American witness protection.
Don't tell them.
I mean, honestly, I have no idea.
They don't know our real identities. We're the Bushy Fam.
Okay, gotcha.
who's in a total state of shock, gives her mom a hug and gives Stan a hug and says, okay, bye, I'll be in touch. And she leaves the motel and she gets in her car and she's about to back up when she looks and sees Stan running outside holding something in his hand. And so Pauline stops, Stan runs up to the window, and he says, hey, I forgot to give you this. And he held up this round piece of metal that he told her was a GPS transponder. It was magnetized, and she should put it out of sight underneath her car. And what it does is it constantly gives off her location to the agents that are following her. So if she was in trouble...
Something's a little off here.
That's off.
That's off.
That is off. Stan has just... I'm not sure about Stan now.
Yeah.
It would be easier for them to find
Why
her.
would he
And
forget
so
it?
Pauline
He
thanked
wanted
him,
to
put the
give it to her
transponder
without her mom knowing.
Yeah.
under her car, and Stan went back into the motel. And so Pauline went back home with the intention of just digesting this information, knowing that she was being watched, she had this radio, she was, relatively safe, and her plan was to just give it a couple of days before she committed to joining the witness protection program and joining the weird world. But after only a couple of days, her paranoia was so high that she dumped her boyfriend, she quit her job, and she moved out of her house into a separate apartment, and she called her mother and said, I can't take it anymore, I feel totally unsafe, I want to join the weird world. Her mother and Stan were delighted at her decision, but they told her it wasn't a simple process getting into the weird world, that a lot of people were involved.
This is why I would never wanted to know. I could have lived in bliss the rest of my life.
Ignorance is bliss.
And now you're pulling me into the weird world.
And her basically giving up her old life. And
Mother, don't ever tell me about the weird world.
Okay.
I don't need to know my past.
That'll be very simple for me.
And so Pauline's mother told her that she would be in touch with one of her agents and they would contact Pauline when it was time for her to go. And so anxious and scared, Pauline began to wait and wait and wait. And her mother said, oh, just give it some time. They'll be in touch soon. But the waiting dragged
I would say a real photo somewhere if it was a real photo.
Okay.
on for 5 years. And in that time, Pauline met a new boyfriend, Kevin, who became her husband. And in conversations with him, Pauline started to doubt this whole mafia thing was even true. And so she decided, in order
Husband's probably part of the mafia.
to find out if this really was a real thing, that the mafia was actually after them, that Pauline would need to set up a sting operation on her mother and Stan. And so Pauline called her mother and very convincingly told her that, oh my goodness, someone just broke into my apartment. I think it was someone from the mafia. I don't know what happened, but can you tell me what to do? Should I call the police? What do I do? And her mother said, no, don't call the police. Whatever you do, don't call the police. I'm going to get in touch with Stan and see if he knows what to do. And just
See, something's off.
She abducted the children. I think that she's the problem. And that...
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why you don't want to call the authorities.
Yeah.
Just a couple of minutes later, Pauline's mother called back and said, okay, honey, I spoke to Stan and he spoke to the undercover agents that...
See, I would have tested the radio. My curiosity at that point, when Stan came out running and said, hey, attach this to your car, my thought would be, something's off.
Yeah.
I'm gonna test this radio to see what happens.
Why didn't he tell me in front of my mom? Is what I was.
Yeah, because I bet the radio just goes to those two.
I bet.
That sit outside your house and have been watching you for all these years, and they said that yes, unfortunately, not one but two men.
Caught in the lie.
Now, see, I missed it. Can you go back?
Yeah.
I was
Watching you
still
for all these
thinking
years.
about what we were thinking.
Spoke to Stan, and he spoke to the undercover agents that sit outside your house and have been watching you for all these years, and they said that yes, unfortunately, not one but two men from the mafia broke into your house today.
See? Caught that lie.
Okay. But luckily, they went up, they grabbed him, they're in custody, so you're safe now. And Pauline said, Mom, I made that up. No one's been in my apartment. I've been here.
Ooh, or it's Stan.
It must be Stan.
And maybe the mom just doesn't know.
Yeah.
The whole day. I lied to you. No one broke in. And it was at this point that Pauline realized her mother and Stan had been living a lie since she was 5 years old. There was no mafia. Her father was not a mobster in some Vancouver crime syndicate. It was all made up. It would turn out Stan was suffering from something called delusion syndrome, where totally normal people.
Okay, so it was Stan. It might not have been the mother.
But he
That
was. But it was delusions. It wasn't. It wasn't
Purposeful.
Yeah, purposeful
Deception.
Totally lucid and have normal lives, have one distinct delusion. And sometimes that delusion is not a big deal. But sometimes it is, like they believe the mafia is after them. And during his relationship with Pauline's mother, he passed on his delusion to her through something called folie à deux, which translates to madness for two, which is shared delusion syndrome, where someone who's delusional, who's a dominant personality, can pass that on to a subordinate personality. After confronting her mother and then also confronting Stan at a later date, neither of them said, this is a lie, you're right, you caught us, because they believed it, and they took to their graves the belief that the mafia was after them. Their big...
Now that's crazy.
Woo!
That's even crazier. So there's no such thing as the weird world.
Well, yeah. I've never heard of anything described like that.
So
The weird
what
world.
they must have come up with something. In their delusional state that it was like that.
Yeah.
biggest concern after Pauline said this isn't true was not that they had been exposed as potential frauds. It was that, oh no, Pauline's going to expose herself to the mafia because she's not using her GPS transponder or her radio or living in the weird world with us. She's going to get assassinated by the mafia. And so even though Pauline never got an apology from her mother or got to really talk about the insanity of this whole situation, because again, her mother and Stan took to the graves the belief that the mafia was in fact after them, Pauline ultimately made peace with the situation by writing a best-selling memoir called Run, Hide, Repeat. It is
Oh.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Actually. I wonder if she ever tried to track down her father.
I wonder if it's on Audible. I bet it's in the book.
Maybe.
Mother, yeah. I bet it's on Audible. Run, hide,
Memoir
repeat.
of a fugitive childhood.
Ooh.
linked in the description below. Check it out.
Nice.
In November of 2004, 52-year-old Peter Porco and his wife, 54-year-old Joan Porco, were like so many other middle-aged, middle-class Americans. They lived in Del Mar, New York, in a comfortable two-story home, and they worked for a living. Peter was an appellate court clerk, and Joan was a speech pathologist. They had been married for over 30 years, and they had 2 sons. Christopher was a 21-year-old student at the University of Rochester, and his brother, Jonathan, was a 23-year-old naval officer stationed at a submarine base in Groningen.
You can tell the difference between them. Like, you can tell he's like Navy or military of some sort just by the way he stands.
Oh, just more rigid and
More uptight.
Uptight.
In Connecticut. On Monday, November 15th, 2004, Peter woke up to start his typical Monday morning work routine. He got up, he got out of bed, he went to the bathroom, he relieved himself, he looked in the mirror, he shaved, he got dressed in his work clothes, he went downstairs, he put on a pot of coffee. While the coffee was brewing, he unloaded the dishwasher and then put the dirty dishes into the dishwasher and started it. He wanted to get his newspaper, so he went outside, he got his newspaper, but he realized he locked himself out of the front door, so he got the spare key out from underneath the mat, opened the front door, went inside, he sat down, had some coffee, read the newspaper. After a few minutes, he put his coffee cup in the sink, he packed himself a lunch in his lunchbox, and then he headed for the door to head for work. Peter was known as a very reliable employee who was also very punctual and rarely missed work. So when he didn't get to...
Mr. Ballen is such a good storyteller.
Oh, yeah.
That as he's telling you all those
I
things
feel
that
like
he
I'm
did,
there. Yeah.
you can see it in your head.
Yep.
Yeah.
I felt like it
Better
was me.
than reading it in a book with
Oh,
a
yeah.
picture.
Yeah.
I mean, he's...
Audible needs to sign this man.
Yes.
And have him read all their books.
Yes. I tell you, it was...
To work that Monday morning, the court was a little bit confused. They called him to see if he was okay. He didn't pick up, so they dispatched a court officer to go make sure he was okay. And so the officer arrives at his house. He sees cars in the driveway, the front door shut. He goes up, he knocks on the door, nobody answers. He tries the handle of the front door. He realizes it's open, so he opens the door and he yells out, "Hey, I'm just looking for Peter." And the door hits something on the ground. He pokes his head inside and looks down.
It's Peter.
And there on the ground, the thing blocking the door, is Peter Porco's body. He's clearly deceased.
Oh, it scared
and
me.
he clearly has a massive head wound. The court officer steps outside immediately, calls 911. Local police show up, they go inside, and sure enough, Peter is dead. They go upstairs and they find his wife, Joan, in bed, also with a massive head wound, but she was still alive. Joan was rushed to a hospital where she underwent emergency surgery and then was put into a medically induced coma. Meanwhile, the police began their investigation into who could have done this. They quickly discovered that the home's alarm system had been smashed and a phone line, because there still was landlines at the time, had been cut from the outside, and a screen in one of the windows had been slashed that looked like...
So which son?
What?
Which son?
Oh, which son? You think a son did it?
I feel like it.
I think it's the Navy man because he's so uptight.
Wow. You think I'm gonna kill you guys?
Just kidding.
I think it's the other one.
Like the way someone climbed into the house. However, nothing appeared to have been stolen because police almost immediately found Peter's wallet with money inside of it
Why
still
do you
sitting
think
in the
it's a
house.
son?
Why else talk about them?
Okay.
As well as very expensive jewelry that belonged to Joan, still sitting in the house. As they continued to search the house, they discovered a fireman's axe that belonged to the Porcos hidden inside of one of the bedroom closets, and it was very clear this was the murder weapon. The Porco sons had been away during this attack. John was on his submarine in Connecticut, and Chris
Couldn't have been the Navy guy.
was at the University of Rochester, and in fact,
Couldn't have been Chris.
Lies.
Chris found out about the attack on his parents when he saw a news report, because this story of this innocent, typical-seeming American couple in a quiet suburb getting struck down by some axe-wielding maniac had gone totally viral, and it was all over the news. And so Chris called the police to get more information about his parents' death. Here's the recording.
Ooh,
Hi, my name is Chris Porco. I was just called by the Times-Union saying that...
I bet
Could
they...
be the son.
No, I think that the parents were involved in something that, you know, maybe some spy business that,
Do you have something to tell me?
yeah.
Are you part of the spy business?
Oh, brother, I couldn't keep a secret for the life of me.
Or is that just your cover?
Okay, so it could be that the kids knew nothing about their actual parents.
My parents were found dead this afternoon. I was wondering if you had any information on me.
He doesn't sound sad. He doesn't sound
Come
upset.
on.
Hey, Chris, whereabouts are you?
I'm at school in Rochester, New York.
Okay, you're in Rochester?
Yes.
Okay, and you're hearing from the Times-Union?
Yeah, they said my parents were found, I guess, I don't know, they didn't say how or anything.
So you will be here probably, you're going to go right to Albany Med?
I don't know, I don't even know where my mom is, but...
Yeah, she is at Albany Med.
Okay, do you know her condition?
No, because I haven't talked to her. Let me give you my pager number.
As you can tell, Chris is extremely emotional. He's
Not during the part we heard.
You lying to me, Mr. Ballen?
beside himself. He can barely speak. He's so upset about what's happened to his parents. No, actually, he sounds as calm as a pizza.
Okay, I was like, did we listen to the same recordings?
Because Chris Porco was actually a psychopath.
Okay. So, who was right? Yeah, probably.
And he was the one who attacked his parents with the axe. As it turns out, Chris was failing at school and taking out huge loans in his father's name by forging his signature. And his father found out about it. So Mr. and Mrs. Porco write their son a strongly worded email where they tell him this behavior has to stop, and they're very disappointed in him, but they love him and they will help him get back on his feet. Chris responded by driving home in the middle of the night, sneaking into his house, and attacking his parents with an axe. While this case...
From a strongly
Real
worded...
photo.
Yeah, from a strongly worded email, you go and kill your parents? What if it was a phone call?
I bet they probably have had hints that this was his personality.
Case is already disturbing and horrific and tragic. It's what happens to Chris's father after the attack that makes it one of the most brutal cases of all time. After being struck 16 times in the head and laying unconsciously in his bed as his son snuck out of his house, Peter suddenly sat up and began his morning routine. He got dressed, he went to the bathroom, he shaved, he went downstairs, he made coffee, he did his chores, he went outside to get the newspaper, he got locked out, he got the key from under the mat, went back inside, he packed his own lunch. When he was finally ready to go, he headed for the door and then he collapsed and he died. Due to the severity of Peter's head...
I thought they were talking about the son for a second, but the dad was the one that got up and did all that.
That's bizarre.
That is.
Wound, his brain was basically broken and it was unable to recognize he had been gravely injured. So in his final moments, he believed it was just a typical Monday morning going about his work routine, when in reality, he had a gaping head wound and he was basically dead after the 16th blow to his head. One of the more...
That is insane.
Wow. I don't know how you would explain that.
Yeah.
If somebody's... Okay, so he may have been, you know, sometimes people are physically dead, like they're...
Yeah.
Wait, no, that doesn't make sense.
Well, what it's
How
saying
could
is
this-
that there's the portion of the brain.
Right, but still, if you're not having circulatory stuff, if you're physically dead, like your heart and your respiration, and you can still have brain activity.
Right.
But still, how can that brain activity cause that other stuff to work if it's dead?
It could be like, so it's a routine for him, right? So it maybe the part where that routine was still good in the brain, but everything else that was hit was part of it that just stopped working. I don't know. I don't ask me.
Surprising and heart-wrenching details of this case is that Joan Porco, she did survive the attack. And after she came out of that medically induced coma, she said she forgot all the details of the attack, even though when she was discovered in her bed, she did indicate that Chris, her son, was the attacker. Nonetheless, she got together $250,000 to post Chris's bail, and she allowed him to come stay with her during his trial. And the two attended the
No.
So if I tried to kill you, you wouldn't still love me?
I wouldn't invite you back to my house.
That's true.
trial together, walking into the courthouse hand in hand. Chris was very quickly found guilty of killing his father and attempting to kill his mother, and he was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. Despite the verdict, Joan Porco still speaks to Christopher over the phone and frequently visits him in prison. It's unclear if she still believes he is innocent. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments what it is and where you found it. Give us the timestamp.
What's the secret?
I don't know.
First to do that, we'll pin you at the top of the comments section.
I have no idea. I wasn't looking for anything.
Yeah, well, next time we watch him, we need to ask what the secret
I'm
is.
just more worried about the
story.
Yeah, that was crazy.
I just don't know. Okay, you guys smarter than me that work in the healthcare field, tell me how that's possible.
Well, I mean, a lobotomy, for instance, can kill part of your brain.
Yes.
Without killing the person. And so what, maybe it was just enough activity where he could go before his body just finally gave out.
But if his lungs and if
that
his
was
body was dead.
No, that was working.
They said he was dead.
He said for all intents and purposes was dead. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean,
If
you
he
need all
used
of
that
that in order to live.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay. Did he say for all intents and purposes?
I think so.
Well, that's okay. You don't have to go back. They'll let us know. Right around here.
Coffee. He did his chores. He went outside to get the newspaper. He got locked out. He got the key from under the mat. Went back inside. He packed his own lunch. When he was finally ready to go, he headed for the door and then he collapsed and he died. Due to the severity of Peter's head wound, his brain was basically broken and it was unable to recognize he had been gravely injured. So in his final moments, he believed it was just a typical Monday morning going about his work routine, when in reality, he had a gaping head wound and he was basically dead after.
Basically dead.
Yeah. But what? Just, you're a neighbor. You're coming out to get your paper. Here comes a dude with a gaping head wound. Hey, how's it going?
Jeez.
Gets his paper and walks back in. How weird would that be? I'd be like,
oh my goodness.
What the heck is going on?
Oh gosh.
Is it Halloween?
Oh my gosh.
Anyways, y'all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, go ahead and give it a like. If you didn't, you can give it a dislike. It's not going to hurt me. Is it going to hurt you?
No.
Or you can give it a like because it's not going to hurt you. If you're new or you haven't yet, please do consider subscribing. It really does help out the channel. We are on our way to 42,000, and each and every subscription is very much appreciated. I hope each and every one of y'all have an absolutely fantastic day or night. And as always, until next time, YouTube, smile like you mean it from the Bushy Fam.